Hello everyone. This is Laraika Laray, and welcome to the 1K plus subscriber Q&A session. This is going to be a bit more of an unscripted video, like I've made a few notes for each of the questions, but generally I'll be going a bit off the cuff, so apologies in advance for any ums and ahs and pauses and the like. I'll do my best to edit some of them out, but this is supposed to be a more casual video, so we'll see how we go. I'm going to go through the questions like roughly in order that I wrote them down, so there'll probably be a bit of doubling up here and there, but in general, I just want to say thank you for the fantastic questions. I absolutely loved thinking about them. Some of them were actually a lot harder to think of answers for than others. So yeah, let's get started. What Monster Hunter game was your first? So I started with Monster Hunter World, back in, actually I have no idea what year it was, some time after Monster Hunter World came out. I've been aware of the franchise for a while. I have a really good friend, shout out to Steve if you are listening, who has been a fan of Monster Hunter for quite a while, but I never actually played any of them. Funny story though, I initially bounced off of World quite quickly. I got walled by, like, Balroth, I think it was, like, really early on. Then I kind of put it down for ages, and eventually I went back, and I got all the way through to Rathalos and Diablos at the end of low rank, and got walled really bad by Rathalos there, so then I just stopped playing for a while, and eventually went back. I tried a new weapon. I had been trying with dual blades, I think, up to that point, and I switched to Switch Axe, and then I got through to the end of Iceborne. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got started. So I am a fiver, technically. Is there any piece of media that fulfills the same craving as playing Monster Hunter for you? So this is actually a really hard question to answer because it kind of depends on exactly what craving I'm trying to satiate. I generally like games with a lot of environmental storytelling and fairly challenging combat, so I think the closest are probably a lot of the FromSoft titles, like your Dark Souls and your Bloodborne and your Elden Rings. Although I also really like Hollow Knight and more recently Silksong and a variety of others. But those games are quite different in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, they're challenging. Yes, they have a lot of environmental storytelling. If I want, like, solid creature design and things like that, I'm actually more likely to go for, like, a horror game. Because while horror monsters tend to not have the same dimensions of creature design, but I do really appreciate them from a creature design angle, and particularly in the more, like, psychological horror games like, say, your Silent Hills, I really like the way that the monsters are designed to echo parts of the protagonist and parts of the world. But yeah, one of probably the first franchise I fell in love with creature design for was actually Resident Evil, like when I was in my teens. Long time ago. It's also worth noting that not even all of the Monster Hunter games satisfy me in the same way. I obviously fell in love with Wilds, but World I had a lot more of a on and off relationship with, and I never really got that into Rise. It was very much a game I pushed through rather than really enjoyed. Do you think you'd want to do a video on Wilds' full story, something like a recap with your observations and speculations mixed in? I think things were laid out pretty clearly, but I'd still like to hear your thoughts about it regardless. So I wasn't actually planning to do one of these, but I can definitely consider it. And I guess this is a good place to kind of talk more about my approach to content creation and this channel broadly, although I'll be touching on it with some later questions as well. One thing I'm trying to work on as I push on with this channel is I want to create content that contributes something that I specifically, with my background and expertise, can bring to the topic. There are a lot of channels out there covering things like builds and news, and others like Oceans that do a really solid job of covering lore. And obviously you get ones like Unnatural History Channel that bring a lot of IRL, ecology, and biology into the discussion to discuss things like creature design. And while I can touch on a lot of those topics, they're not really my specialty, and they're not really what I can give to both the Monster Hunter community and to discussions about video games in general. So, whether a full walkthrough of the story is going to be part of that is something I'll have to think about. One thing that I have been thinking about is I think before Ascendance comes out, I might replay through the story on a fresh character and record a lot of my thoughts and feelings and commentary as I go through the story. Partly because I think it would be fun, and partly so I can actually have a solid record of a lot of the incidental dialogue and completely missable conversations you can have during the course of the story. So I would expect to see that sometime before Ascendance comes out, like probably relatively close. There was a lore playthrough creator for the Dark Souls communities who, I think it was Aegon of Astora, who did a similar kind of lore playthrough of some of the kind of FromSoft games, and I'd really like to basically do something very similar for Monster Hunter Wilds, closer to Ascendance's release. What's your favorite monster type in Monhan, and why that particular type? So this is super hard because honestly, pretty much every category of monster has monsters I love and monsters I don't love in it. There are a couple, which I think are the safe options, which have basically only monsters that I like in. The most recent addition being the Cephalopods, which contains only absolute bangers, but only two of them. And similar with the Temnocerans, I think Nerscylla, Arachnakadaki, and Lalabarina are all like absolutely fantastic creature designs, and I just love them. So those are probably the safe options, since I love basically every member of the group. If I had to pick a broader category, though, I'd actually say my favorite are the Fanged Wyverns. I love Tobi Kadachi, I love Ebony Odogaron, I love Dodogama, I even love the Jagras in the Gyros, and especially the Wolgs in Iceborne. I really like the idea of a kind of general lizard body shape and how they played with the design by integrating various mammalian characteristics into it, like Odogaron's dog-like traits, Toby's flying squirrel, Zinogre with the kind of wolf-bear aspects it has. Initially wolf, but I'd say that the New World design has a lot of bear in it. I generally just like Fanged Wyverns, and one of my favorite Elder Dragon designs is Kulve Taroth, and Kulve Taroth is basically just a big Fanged Wyvern in general, in terms of morphology. Also, like I mentioned, it has Wolgs, and I love Wolgs. They're probably my favorite small animal, or small monster in the franchise. My question is actually about how you decided to choose your channel's name. It's very satisfying to hear and say and sounds absolutely magical, so I would love to hear the backstory on that. Okay, so this is going to be maybe a fairly long question, a long answer, and it's quite funny, and there are many layers to this. So, the actual initial reason is actually you touched on it in the question, which is I like the way it sounds. It's a really fun name to say. The slightly longer story is that Lorika is a name I use in a lot of games for characters and character creation. I initially started this channel talking mostly about Final Fantasy XIV and a couple of gacha titles, and I wanted a name that wasn't just the name of my FF14 character to give it a slightly broader appeal and not tie it to that specific game, so I went with Lorika. Which was a good move in hindsight because, yeah, I don't talk that much about FF14 right now. The name Lorika itself stems from a character in an unpublished fiction story I was writing many, many years ago. It wasn't even the protagonist, it was like the name of a background, like, history story character that was honestly not that relevant, but I really, really liked it. As to why I picked the name at all, that's a bit of a longer story. It stems back to when I was thinking of specializing into the history of Western esotericism. So that's like modern occultism, ceremonial magic, the early roots of New Age spirituality, demonology, secret societies, all of that. I still do research and all of that, but it isn't directly my specialty. Anyway, so the name Laraika is a variant form of Larahe, who is a demonic figure in modern occultism who appears as a handsome archer dressed in green. One of my early personal research deep dives was actually about this figure, because it was both one of few demonic figures in this era who was, on the one hand, basically just a guy, and also because it bore a striking resemblance to Robin Hood. So I basically sat down at some point to figure out if there was any actual link between Robin Hood as a kind of character in British folklore and this specific demonic figure, Larahe. Ultimately, the actual answer was no, but maybe also yes, and is a bit too long to get into here. It was ultimately never something I could or would try to prove through peer review, so there's a lot of vibes-based research that went into it. But basically, it had to do with the Middle English tradition of outlaw figures as folk heroes, which is the tradition that Robin Hood is part of. The way that this figure was reinforced and then parodied by Geoffrey Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales when he made this figure an actual demon in the Friar's Tale. The history of the English longbowman in continental European warfare, and also the figure of the yeoman or the freeman archer as a kind of liminal figure in the shift from European feudalism to more centralized statehood in the early modern period, and how this broader cultural shift also influenced the development of Christian demonology in the 16th century onwards with the Malleus Maleficarum and the Pseudomonarchia Daemonorum of Johann Weyer, which is also the document that Larahe was kind of first attested in. Ultimately, it was about how these various cultural, political, and religious themes potentially coalesced into the figure of basically the demonic archer Larahe, whose name in the earliest records is written and read as Laray. So yeah, both parts of the name of this channel are actually from the same source. The likely chain of pronunciation is something like Ore, Lore, Lore, but spelled slightly differently, more as Larai, Larache, and then Laracha. And then Laraika, because nobody ever really says the ha sound correctly unless you speak Arabic. I picked Laraika, by the way, solely because I liked how it sounds, and also it's the more feminine version of the name, at least to Romance language speakers, where A is a feminine name ending. I might do a deep dive one day in a video going over the exact history and my chain of, I guess, theorization, but that's the Cliff Notes version. The very short version is just that it's a name from the history of Western occultism that are used for a character in an unpublished story, liked the sound of, and started using for nameable protagonists in games. It was also the name I chose, ironically, and maybe prophetically in hindsight, for my hunter in Monster Hunter World when I started it. So maybe this was always meant to be a Monster Hunter channel in the end. Also, despite all of this history, I am not actually a bow main. What's one dream in life that you have had and achieved or are working towards now? Probably the most obvious answer to this is that I have a doctorate. It took me many, many years to get. I also have a book published based loosely on that doctoral research and some of the postdoctoral research that I did afterwards, which came out a few years ago now. I'm really, really proud of it. It's really good, and it's just nice to think that I have like a mark out there that means a lot to me, into which I poured a lot of myself. I still get emails from people who've read it, who find it really helped them or really helped them understand certain topics. So yeah, it just brings me a lot of joy. One of the things I'm working towards now, though, is this channel, and that's maybe a bit of a trite answer, but I got into watching YouTube video essays back in, I want to say 2018, when I was living in Japan at the time, and I really enjoyed them, and just the idea of being able to make creative work like this and put it out into the world is something I wanted to do for a very long time, but I didn't really have the skill sets to do it. I never trained in audio or video editing, for example, and I just didn't know how to do any of those skills. So honestly, being able to do this is I'm learning a lot. It's really fun, and I just like being able to make work about things that I love. Maybe a boring one, but what are your three favorite monsters? So this is also a super hard question because it depends a lot on whether I'm working from ecology, lore, fight, design, theming within this narrative, etc. So let's just talk about some monsters that I love, actually. So, first up is actually just Toby Kadachi from World. This is a really simple one. I just absolutely love its design. I just think it's fantastic. My favorite snake, like IRL, is the European adder. I just absolutely love how it looks. I think it has such a beautiful coloration and patterning. I love the red eyes with the black and white pattern on it. But in general, I really like vipers. I really like the way that vipers look. Like, I just think they look really, really cool. And so Toby Kadachi being a viper combined with this like flying squirrel is just it's just an absolutely peak design. I just absolutely love it. And it is purely aesthetic. I mean, I like the fight a bit, but primarily this is just about creature design and like general aesthetic. Second monster, I'm gonna go with Shei Wu, actually. I really like New Udra in terms of big land kraken, but I love Shei Wu. I love its weird, like, starfish vampire squid cephalopod inspiration. I also like so this is, I guess, gonna touch on another thing that's just about environmental design. The ruins of Wyveria in Wilds have this very, like, I wanna say eldritch quality, like, obviously they're full of, like, strange constructs, you're, like, descending down into the earth, finding these strange, like, long-dead civilization and secrets. There's a very Lovecraftian undercurrent to some of Wyveria, and I really like the way that Shei Wu kind of builds onto this, being a kind of non-artificial denizen that honestly just looks really out there. Like, it has these fake mouths, like, on its head. It has, like, a fake face, almost, like a weird beard. Like, it has the blades that it forms out of mucus. It's a very, very strange creature. And I love that it reinforces this eldritch, unknowable strangeness to the ruins of Wyveria with its own kind of independent, like, non-construct self. Third monster, this is hard. I'm gonna go with this is gonna be a variant, so it's gonna be maybe a bit cheeky, but I really like Frostfang Barioth. I've talked about Frostfang Barioth in my variants video. Normal Barioth, I'm actually not a huge fan of. Like, I think it's fine, but honestly, I think sometimes it looks kind of a bit dumb. But Frostfang just has this aura about it with the kind of the extra hoariness of its fur, like the way the tusks are frozen over and not like bright yellowy, creamy color that they usually are. I love that it conveys this sense of age and danger and threat and kind of the feralness of living out in the hinterlands, like far away from any semblance of civilization and comfort, and how it brings that to the part of the Hoarfrost Reach that you are familiar with, to like the fight with it. It's just such a well-designed creature. And honestly, I'm just really sad that we're probably not really going to see it again very much, because it's one of those monsters that's very endemic to the region that it's in, and yeah, I mean, I can go back to World and fight it if I want. I'm playing through World again at the moment on PC. I originally played it on console. So eventually I'm going to get back there and I'm going to be, oh yeah, Frostfang Barioth. But it makes me sad because I think even if we get Barioth in Ascendance, I do think there's a fairly solid chance. I think it would be a very good monster for the Ice Shard Cliffs, and also probably a very good Guardian variant for like an Ice Guardian. But in general, we're probably not going to get Frostfang again, and I just really like it. As a bonus, I'm going to say that my favorite Elder Dragon specifically is Nakakos. I just really love the idea of a weird cuttlefish disguising itself with bones to mimic dragons, and also how it initially has this franchise jumping the shark feeling with a two-headed skeleton dragon that's straight out of genre fantasy, only to strip that back and have it be something that's honestly both more grounded, but also infinitely stranger than just a two-headed skeleton dragon would be, like in terms of gaming broadly rather than Monster Hunter specifically. And my favorite small monster is Wolgs. I just love Wolgs. I was so sad we didn't get a great Wolg in Iceborne, and if we did get one, it would definitely be here on this list, but I just think they're so cool. I love their design, I love their general aesthetic, their armor is peak. I think I didn't realize it because I hadn't played World on PS4 for a very long time, but when I booted it up, I realized I was wearing the Wolg armor purely for aesthetics. How did you come to discover Monster Hunter, and which game did you start with? I kind of touched on this earlier, but I started with World. Um, I was aware of the franchise long before that due to one of my best friends, shout out again to Steve, playing a lot of the older games, I think. I don't know if Steve started with 4 or started with Try or started with one of the earlier ones even, but Monster Hunter was a franchise I was aware of for quite a long time before I played it. And I'd actually played a lot of the Monster Hunter clone games before I even touched base Monster Hunter itself. Like, I spent a lot of time playing Soul Sacrifice on the PS Vita, for example. Shout out to Soul Sacrifice, underrated gem. More people should have played it. I played a lot of Tokiden and then Tokiden 2 as well. And yeah, those were the main ones that I played. I did touch on some of the others. I played a bit of Freedom Wars and a bit of God Eater, but I never really got into those. And then eventually I started with World on PS4, and yeah, just it was great. Although I did bounce off it initially, so maybe it wasn't that great in hindsight. Does the desire sensor actually exist? Well, the like 8 plus Gogmazios I had to get through to get that most recent Wartorn Dragon Gem definitely suggests that it does. What's your favorite hunting locale? The Wounded Hollow. No, honestly though, probably either the Windward Plains or the Scarlet Forest, although I am pretty partial to the middle section of Wyveria with all the glowing plant life. But I'd say I just love fighting in the plains because it's very open, it's very aesthetically pleasing, and the forest is just gorgeous. I really enjoy fighting there. I really enjoy exploring it. I really enjoy just walking around the forest, seeing everything. What's the biggest aspect or feature you hope Wild's Ascendance will deliver on? For my second question, you say no AI is used in your videos. Do you think it's important to express creativity and effort in your work, especially now in today's media where AI slop has blown up? So I guess I'll touch on these in order. As much as this is a narrative-focused channel, I think the biggest aspect or feature I hope that Wilds delivers on is the monster roster. Wilds has probably one of the best overall rosters in recent titles in terms of monster variety. It's not all flying wyverns like World was, and I just really hope they continue with this trajectory in Ascendance. World also ran into a bit of an issue with the Iceborne roster, breaking up a lot of the cohesion of the base game maps, and I'm really hoping that Ascendance manages to have a solid roster that doesn't overly disrupt the base game's biome cohesion too much. Although, I know given the nature of Master Rank expansions that this just might not logistically be possible. As a narrative enjoyer, of course, though, I really do hope the story continues to expand on the themes of the base game in interesting ways. Like, I'm sure it will be kind of jank, like the base game story is a bit kind of jank at times. But if it's kind of jank in an interesting way, I'll be pretty happy. As for the AI question, I mean, yeah, basically. One of the things I think it's actually really important to touch on here is something about needing not just the need to produce art, but also the need to emphasize and enjoy the process of creating art. Because that's, I think, something that GenAI is really being used to systematically devalue. There's this tweet I saw a while back that kind of lives rent-free in my head by some random billionaire whose name I forget. It might have been Warren Buffett, but it could be somebody else. Anyway, basically, he was saying that artists should be celebrating AI use because it allows them to complete, like, a whole bunch more art in a limited time. Like, now you can make, like, 1,000 pictures when you could only make one before, that kind of thing. And, well, for one, I don't think I've ever seen a more fundamental misunderstanding of why people create art at all, but I also think it exposes this thing that I've seen a lot with AI discussions, which is this celebration of ends over means, of I guess, product over process. Like, it presumes that the process of creation itself is something fundamentally meaningless and without value. So I'm obviously an academic by training. I've spent honestly like over 15 years at this point of my life training and working in academia across a few countries and a bunch of institutions. And a lot of that has been teaching myself and being taught how to think, how to read, how to write, how to do research, all of that. My finished papers and even these videos that I make here are the end result of much longer and broader processes of just engaging with the world, things that will never be part of the final product, which honestly are more valuable and a more valuable part of the process than the end product itself. Like, those tend to be the bits that teach me the most in the course of creating things. So the process is enriching in its own right, is I guess what I want to say here. And the way that Gen AI is honestly being forced onto everything is fundamentally based on the assumption that the process has no value. There's no value in learning to do anything. What matters is that the results are made, not even whether those results are even accurate or good. And to be blunt, the results are often really, really bad, not just in impact, but just in quality. Certainly, what's not valuable is that you understand any of the results or how they were produced. And I don't know that I need to say this, but not knowing how you got to somewhere is just really dangerous on so many levels, especially as a view that is being kind of pushed on a systematic global level in so many countries right now. It is so important to know why we are in a place, because how else do we get out of it? And I mean, I guess the point is that we can't get out of it, but that's a whole other matter. But anyway, yeah, I guess to wrap up, go make art, go learn to code, go to write, practice makeup, learn a new type of dance, literally anything, especially when you're bad at it, because nobody is good at anything when you start. I had no idea how to do any form of audio or video editing when I started this channel. Heck, I barely knew how to edit thumbnails. Like, the thumbnail for one of my early expansion speculation videos, I think it's the one with the Chupacabra in the title, in the thumbnail, I literally just opened a screenshot in MS Paint, I freehand traced the outline of the Chupacabra, and I made it bigger. And this wasn't because I thought it would look good or funny, I did think that, but it was literally because I did not know how to edit images. Like, I had no idea how to do anything more complicated than that. I'm a lot better at it now, but I still really can't do, like, anything. But I'm better than I was a few months ago. And I'm going to be getting better over the next few months as I continue to do work on this channel. And I just fundamentally enjoy that process. I think it's a really valuable process, and I think it's really important. And yeah, so that's kind of, I guess that's kind of a long ramble on where I stand on that topic. But yeah, thank you for asking this, and apologies to anyone else who didn't want to hear me rant. Actually, no apologies. I'm not going to take anything back there. So the next question is a slightly long question. I'm just going to put it on screen. It's basically about the crossover collab monsters in World and Wilds, and what the guild would do if they reproduced, essentially. The end of the question is, would the guild let these populations establish, or just immediately begin the extermination of said populations before being able to establish? This is specifically about Behemoth and the Nursella clone in World and Wilds, respectively. So, to answer this, I think it varies actually by game. I think the guild and world would immediately begin the culling games. They generally have a shoot first, ask ecologists later approach to elder dragons, especially, which Behemoth technically is in that game. And I think it would be fairly easy to classify it as some kind of invasive species. As for how it might impact the Elder's Recess, though, it's hard to say. The area is an Elder nesting site, so chances are it might simply be kept in check by the other Elders in the environment. Although, I think the Nursilla clone in Wilds is actually maybe a more interesting situation, because, I mean, as we've seen with Arkvelt, the guild has a rather lax policy regarding potentially invasive species. And after the events of Wilds are also relatively chill with, or at least tolerant of, artificial life. There's kind of no qualitative difference between a Nursilla clone created by Omega and the Guardians, like, ultimately. So I actually think the guild in Wilds would adopt a far more laissez-faire approach to the Nursilla clone and wait to see what happened before trying to intervene. Whether that's good or bad is, I think, another matter. Although, funny headcanon thought, what if the random lone Omega micros you can sometimes find amidst the Nursilla hatchlings on the cliffs are actually Nursilla clone babies? I like that idea, I think that would be great. If you were to design a flagship, how would you go about it? Not just from a creature design perspective, but story relevant / themes. And how connected / disconnected would you want those aspects to be to the older games? So, finally, I did kind of design a flagship in my last video on expansion flagships, so that probably gives some insight into my process. In general, though, I would like to think about the themes and the plot, and how I would want the flagship to fit into those. As a video game, though, I'd also like to think about it in terms of player parallels and interaction, both narratively and in combat. Monster Hunter as a franchise is fundamentally very gameplay first, even with the heavy narrative focus of low rank in Wilds, and how the flagship is encountered on the battlefield is a very core part of what makes it work or not. I really like hunting Arkveld, for example, and that's a large part of, I think, why I enjoy her as a flagship so much. In terms of general principles, though, I think it relates a lot to what your goal is in creating a piece of art. While it's not among my favorite monsters by a long shot, I think Magnamalo is a pretty well-conceived flagship. Kimura is frequently, I say, beset by the rampage, and so you have this idea of the flagship that is known to follow after the rampage. It's themed on those possessed suits of samurai armor you see in a lot of Japanese media, which reinforces this sense of it as a, I want to say, lingering grudge that stalks old battlefields. So you have these, so in Magnamalo, you have these concepts of kind of combat, of violence, and of this haunting manifestation in this armored ghostly predator, which complements the idea of Kimura as this place under constant threat, specifically constant threat of the rampage. That said, I do think Magnamalo looks a bit too much like an enemy from a Neo game, but that's also partly because Rise draws on the same conceptual well that the Neo games do. And if I step back, a lot of my issues with Magna are issues that I have with base Rise's narrative structure, or lack thereof in general. I do think it's a bit bulky, but, you know, that's neither here or there. I also think Zenogre's a lot too bulky, so that's just an issue I have with some of the Fanged Wyvern skeletons, really. Let's take Nergigante and World. So, in terms of, like, theme and narrative inclusion. So, Nergigante has some symbolic connections to the story. It's, as I touched on in my last video, its theme is destruction and rebirth, or renewal, tying into the overarching narrative of Base World with the Elder Crossing, the life and death of Elder Dragons, Worlds' distinct focus on ecology, all of that. So there's a big death and rebirth kind of theme in Wilds generally. I'm replaying World at the moment, though, actually, and one of the things that really struck me when I was going through it was this theme of being drawn onwards towards something, which comes up in Base Wild. Not Base Wild, Base World. For example, when you talk to the handler before you do the Capture Zora Magdaros mission, she talks a lot about her grandfather and the legend of the Sapphire Star, and this idea that Zora is being drawn towards something like her grandfather was kind of drawn towards the new world with the image of the sapphire star being used. And I kind of really liked this because, as we know, as we get to the underworld, the sapphire star, at least on some level, is symbolic of Xeno'jiiva, and Xeno'jiiva is very literally manipulating the Elder Crossing to draw more and more elders to itself to feed its need for more and more quantities of bioenergy. And of course, Zora is I guess, a victim of this. But then you also have like Nergigante, who is chasing Zora Magdaros because it wants its bioenergy, but in the same way you and the Commission in general is chasing Zora Magdaros. So both Nergigante and the player are chasing after Zora, who's being drawn on inexorably by this sapphire star. And so there's this idea of being constantly drawn onwards that I really like in World, and I kind of missed the first time I played through it. And I like how Nergigante kind of fits into that. So there's a kind of parallelism here between Nergigante and the player, but I'll be honest, it's honestly quite subtle. I mean, it's very overt when you look for it, but it's something you could easily play through the game and just not notice. Like, I didn't notice it the first time I went through. In general, I want to say every work, whether that's Monster Hunter or any other franchise, is going to have themes, whether those themes are intended or otherwise. And honestly, sometimes the themes are a bit more of a vibe. One of the things that Oceans talks about in his Making of Monster Hunter documentary that really stuck with me is the way that the developers wanted to create the sense of awe in the player when they encountered the monsters. I believe they analogized it to Dr. Grant in the first Jurassic Park movie when he sees a living dinosaur for the first time. So there's this idea of awe and majesty, but also like threat and danger, at least from the perspective of the hunter character rather than the player. And I think going for the creation of that kind of awe, like, is itself like a core aspect of the theme, and I think a core aspect of Monster Hunter as a franchise in terms of its development of flagship monsters and monsters in general. And I think it's totally fine to just go for a really cool monster design that you look at and you go, wow, that's really cool. Like, sometimes I think that's enough. Most wanted monsters for Ascendance. Mine are Agnactor, Celtus Queen, Plesioth, and Duramboros. So this is a pretty hard question. All the ones where I have to pick out monsters are really hard questions. If I have to keep it to monsters that haven't been in New Gen title yet, Celtus Queen and Agnactor are also pretty up there for me. First, partly because I think it would be really interesting to expand on the pack dynamic and have it with a small harem of 2 to 3 Celtus. And the second, because in a game that's so Leviathan heavy, the fact that Oil World doesn't have one is honestly kind of wild. The basin is also very vertically structured, which could let Agnactor's burrowing be showcased a bit more, because its kind of main gimmick in, I think, the 3rd gen was that it moved between layers of the volcano. Other than those two, I'd really like Giginox back because it's creepy as hell. I haven't actually fought Giginox because I never played Try, or like 3U even. And I've heard its fight is actually pretty bad, but in general, the fights tend to get updated with each game in general, so I'd really like to see what they did with Giginox, like, in a modern title. I also just think it would go really well on the cliffs, both because it loves cold climates, and I already want to see all its little baby Gigi fighting the Nursilla hatchlings. I just think that would be a really cool ecological interaction on the cliffs. That said, we're probably just going to get Kezu again, and I can't genuinely see both of them in a modern gen game, because, yeah. If we do include some monsters from 5th gen, though, I really, really want to see young Garuga in Ascendance. Mostly because I want to see its relationship to young Kutku. I want to see them interact in like a modern gen title. And I'd also really like to see Rachna Kadaki from Rise, mostly because I want to see all 3 Temnocerans in a single title. I just think that would be really cool. Also Gosharag from Rise, because I think it would be really fun to fight with offsets and power clashes with its ice blades. I just think that would be great. If you were a researcher in the world of Monster Hunter, what would your field of study be? So I'd definitely be a cultural anthropologist like Alma, although I also relate a lot to Eric. I'd probably be a cultural anthropologist with an extra interest in biology, much like Alma is a cultural anthropologist with an extra interest in archaeology. But yeah, in general, I see myself as very much like Alma. What's your favorite monster/monster variation, and what weapons do you main? So I kind of touched on earlier, I think my favorite variations is Frostfang Barioth. I just really love it. I think it elevates the base Barioth design like so much. In general, though, I'd say one of my other favorite monster variations is Chaotic Gore, just because I absolutely love how it plays with the Megala ecology. I just think it's a really cool and really interestingly conceived variation, and something I'd love to see a lot more of, like style-wise. As for weapons, though, I mostly main Greatsword and Switch Axe, but I've been playing a lot more Sword and Shield recently and really enjoying it. I'm doing my new Rise playthrough currently on Sword and Shield. It's also worth noting, and I touched on this earlier, but back when I first tried World, I started with dual blades because I too remember being an edgy teen with a love of dual wielding, and that has continued well into my adulthood. But I'll be honest, I really didn't like them, and they're a key reason why I initially bounced off of World. Like, I just didn't really realize how much weapons changed the way you play. And I much enjoyed the game a lot more when I went back and I tried Switch Axe. And then when Wilds came out, I initially played it through with Switch Axe, and then when I moved to PC, I decided to go with Greatsword because it was just a weapon I hadn't tried before. And I absolutely love how Greatsword plays in Wilds. I just think it's fantastic. So yeah, mainly Greatsword, Switch Axe, and a bit of Sword and Shield is the answer here. Infinite games but no bacon, or infinite bacon but no games? Infinite games. See, I do like bacon, but I haven't had it in months, and I can pretty much go without it fairly easily. Games, though, games I can't do without, so definitely infinite games. Although, caveat, despite infinite games, make sure there is no crunch and that everyone is fairly compensated for their labor, especially this day and age, but forever. You mentioned being a researcher, so I would love to know what your favorite research topic was. I'd also like to read the paper if possible. For something less academic, though, is there an animal that you'd like to see represented in Monster Hunter? So, firstly, I can't really link papers without doxing myself, so I'm sadly not going to do that. But in general, like, my actual research is very different from this channel, so it might not even be immediately relevant. That said, so I have ADHD, and one of the features of ADHD is the most fascinating research topic is actually whatever I'm researching at the moment, and I mostly just forget about previous research topics once they're done. I did actually genuinely try to think back on some of my earlier research topics for this question, and I was just like, they're all boring to me now, though. Not that they're actually boring, they're honestly kind of fascinating, and I was completely obsessed with them while I was doing them, but that's just how my brain works. That said, probably my favorite part of research, especially doing research when you have ADHD, are like the rabbit holes you fall down. I love falling down research rabbit holes because they're just absolutely fascinating. And to give a current example, this is a video that's probably going to be out in a few weeks. Hopefully fairly short one, but I'm currently working on a video on the fake trees in the Scarlet Forest, which seem to produce the downpour. And that topic spiraled into this research warren about early modern medicinal cures, Christian religious iconography, the use of cinnabar in alchemy, both in the West and in China, ancient Greek authors writing about dragons fighting elephants. And that all started from me going, those trees look kind of weird in a video game. So honestly, that whole process and like what happens when you fall down those rabbit holes is just perfection. It's just perfect. Wouldn't change anything in the world. Is there an animal you'd like to see represented in Monster Hunter? A few weeks ago, I was dreaming up ideas for a juvenile Gogmazios that would like roam around in the basin because I just think that would be cool, and I'd prefer it to getting Teostra in Ascendance. But in general, when I was thinking of that, I partly inspired the idea on the scalyfoot gastropod, which is this type of snail that lives by sulfurous vents in the deep sea. And I kind of imagined it as this quasi-leviathan or even piscine wyvern skeleton crawling around eating sulfur and leaving drakesbone oil trails everywhere. But in, yeah, general, I'd love something based on the scalyfoot gastropod. Visually, though, there's also a Xeno'jiiva concept art inspired by the blue dragon Nudibranch, and I would love to see a monster based on that again. It's a design I really hope they go back to. What are your favorite franchises slash single games you still haven't made any videos of yet? Well, I've only made videos on this channel on Final Fantasy XIV and Monster Hunter. So there's a lot of games that I've played that I would absolutely love to do videos about. I'd love to do something on the Final Fantasy VII Remake series once it's actually done, where I talk about the general concept of video game remakes and media remakes in general. So that's like a topic that I really want to touch on in the future, because honestly, the way that FF7 Remake has handled the concept of a remake in like video game terms is something I find absolutely fascinating and would love to kind of think about more. I don't know if anyone has played this, but there is a shooter Souls-like ARPG roguelite series called Remnant that I really, really love, and have a lot of thoughts about, particularly the second one, that will probably be a video essay one day, either on this channel or elsewhere. This is actually an interesting topic, though, because I want to say that if there's a game I've played and loved that I also think drops the ball somewhere, there's probably a video essay at least in my brain about it. I love thinking about games. It seems weird to call them games that are mid because of how that term is used, but I love thinking about pieces of media that reach for the stars and fall short in some crucial way, and why that is and how that works. And I enjoy that far more than thinking about pieces of media that are just quote unquote good. Media that's just good, I can appreciate, but I don't necessarily have a lot to say about it. But in terms of like narrative design and narrative theming, games that fail in some critical way are just ones that I really, really like thinking about. If you were to design a new variant for your least favorite monster, what would it be? So this is actually really hard to answer because I'm genuinely unsure what my least favorite monster is. I can find something redeeming about pretty much every monster that I dislike. Like, for example, I'm not a huge fan of Magnamalo, but I love the way it integrates the possessed samurai armor design, and I touched on some of its themes earlier in terms of how its themes fit into the general narrative structure of Rise, and those are things that I can really, really appreciate in Magnamalo, even if I'm not a huge fan of its design. To reframe the question a bit, though, I want to think a bit about who in Wilds might be improved most with a variation and which variation I'd pick. So I'm going to say Balahara. Balahara was introduced at the start of the game, showcasing the pack dynamic, but that pack dynamic is just not present when you actually fight it. You do occasionally get teams of two walking about the place, but I'd really like a variation that was a kind of alpha Balahara that's bigger, probably has stronger, like, slime or gunk, maybe that does defense down, a bit like Acidic Glavenus, or maybe Fulgurite-related powers. Like, the Balahara in general are coated in Fulgurite armor, and I think something that played with that and maybe a bit with friction to create lightning charges would be really interesting. Basically something that corrals a lot of the smaller Balahara into maybe some kind of frenzy. I just think that would be really interesting to play with. How's it feel to be Unnatural History Channel but better? Joking. So, I love how I think on every single video I get, I have at least one comment that's either comparing me to Unnatural History Channel or saying I sound like Unnatural History Channel or something else. And honestly, this is really good praise, at least for me. So, something I didn't touch on earlier about how I bounced on and off the franchise with the world actually relates to UHC. Our Natural History channel is actually a big part of what made me give Monster Hunter as a game like a second try after bouncing off of World. I initially got a bit burnt out, and it was mostly through listening to his video essays on the ecology of the various monsters that made me come to a new, more in-depth appreciation for the franchise as a whole, that then made me really, really want to get back into it and to kind of soak myself and immerse myself in the world in a way that I just hadn't the first time I played it, when I was very gameplay focused and not very good at the game. So yeah, so shout out to UHC. You are literally why this channel exists in its current form, although you may never know who I am. So yeah. This actually touches on something else, which is I would like to turn this channel into something similar to what UHC has managed to build in terms of bringing academic insights into the franchise and also to other franchises, although we have very different fields. Maybe I can be the Alma to his Eric. That would be very fun. So yeah, shout out to UHC. You're great. What monster would you kiss? Chadacabra. I mean, look at that tongue. I mean, how could I resist? Sitting there watching the opening of Wilds with Yasai getting slimed on, being like, oh yeah, that should be me. You do an excellent job with the Monster Hunter deep dives. Are you going to stay strictly Monster Hunter or branch into other games and media? So I've kind of touched on earlier in this video, but this channel didn't start as a Monster Hunter channel. It started as a Final Fantasy XIV channel primarily, with also a couple of early videos on some gacha games. Primarily I think it was Wuthering Waves, which was mostly the game I was playing at the time. And while Monster Hunter is my special interest at the moment, there is a very real chance that I will eventually run out of things to say about it. As much as I don't want that to happen, and I really enjoy writing about Monster Hunter, I am also painfully aware that I really need to start branching out and making at least occasional videos on other topics. In some ways, I think this channel might end up a bit like I mostly do Monster Hunter content, but with occasional video essays on other pieces of media or like general topics. I'd really like a situation like that, so we'll see how this goes. If you could magic any cryptid or mythological monster into reality, from any source, Monster Hunter included, what would it be and why? Mythology's huge. I just want to say the Kraken, because I think the Kraken is really cool. But I think it's worth thinking that any large monster in Monster Hunter, or indeed most other franchises, would probably get instantly extinctioned by modern military hardware. So I'm actually going to go with a small monster and go back to my beloved Wolg. I think Wolgs would be really cool in reality, partly because I really like the idea of a pack-based, medium-sized predator lizard. I think pack-based lizards is just a really cool idea. And they're also adorable, and because they're pack-based, maybe we could domesticate them. I think that would be really cool. I mean, Raider Ride does exist in Iceborne, so maybe it's possible. In general, I actually wish that Sacred from Wilds were real, mostly because I think riding around on a raptorial bird wyvern is way cooler than riding around on a horse. Horse girls may disagree, but this is my take, and I will stand by it. Tell us something unexpected about yourself. I am not, in fact, secretly Unnatural History channel, despite what some people may say. Who are your top 3 style inspirations and/or icons? So this is a YouTube channel, so I'm actually just going to go with other YouTubers who've inspired me for this question. As I touched on earlier, UHC, just because his work is a large part of why this channel exists at all, and especially any of the Monster Hunter content that I do. But my number one games-based video essayist has to be Jacob Geller. I absolutely love Geller's work and the general approach he takes to art and art analysis in general. If I can do anything on the level of him, eventually I will be a very happy camper. Stepping outside of video games briefly, one of my actual other favorite YouTubers is a YouTuber called Melon Tea, who makes literary analysis videos about the Mongol One Piece. I just love her approach and her sense of humor and the critical eye and level of sincerity she brings to media analysis. I think sincere media analysis is really, really important, and she's just really fun. I really like her takes on One Piece. I've been reading One Piece for like 20 years. So like her approach is just something I really, really enjoy. Similarly, I really love Super Eyepatch Wolf. His approach to media analysis is lovely to hear for similar reasons. And this is maybe a bit left field, but probably one of my favorite YouTubers in general is one called FD Signifier. He mostly does politically informed content and deep dives into hip-hop history and culture. So not really that relevant here, but I just absolutely love his general approach to content creation, and also he's really old like I am, and having an older YouTuber to listen to is just something I deeply appreciate on a very human level. Do you plan on doing this long term? Say pass through Wilds and Ascendance's lifespan. If so, would you cover other games, like you mentioned you'd like to cover Final Fantasy, or look back at this franchise's history and other aspects of it? So I kind of touched on this a bit before, so I'm going to kind of flesh it out here. So my current aim for this channel is to continue with it for as long as I have ideas to make videos with, partly because I fundamentally enjoy the process. Making these games has given me a huge chance to talk about a franchise that I love, at least more recently, apply a lot of my academic background that I genuinely just don't get to make use of in my day-to-day life and my day-to-day research, and do some new deep dives into the odd rabbit hole as they turn up. I've also just learned a lot of skills that I didn't have before, like video and audio editing, and how to make thumbnails, which is honestly just things I did not need to do in my more IRL academic life. So in terms of general content plan, my current idea is to start sprinkling in the odd non-Monster Hunter video now and again, as and when they take my interest. Mostly because I know I'm going to eventually run out of things to say, both about Wild specifically and Monster Hunter as a whole, even if that does take me a good long while to do. Expect a lot of Monster Hunter content at least through Wilds and Ascendance's lifespan, but after that I think it's going to vary a lot. I haven't played a lot of the older games, so I think I would definitely like to go back to them and see what they're like and their appeal, and maybe do some environmental analysis or unearthing of kind of themes in them. But we're going to have to see. Either way, expect this channel to be around for a while. I'm really enjoying it. It might not always be Monster Hunter related, but Monster Hunter is very likely going to be a major focus in general. So yeah, just wait and see. And that was the last question. So I hope you really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed answering a lot of your questions. Sorry for all of the pauses and the ums and the ahs that were doubtless throughout this video. I hope at least you enjoyed getting to hear me speak a lot more off the cuff and a lot more free than I am with my scripted videos. But yeah, in general, I just want to say thank you all for being here. You've made this channel what it is. It's amazing that we're probably going to be encroaching on 2,000 subscribers by the time this video actually comes out, which is really, really wild to me. So I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to have you all. I enjoy reading all your questions. You're just fantastic. Apologies if you can hear my dog barking in the background. He is very loud. And I just want to say, have a good week. Hopefully we'll be getting some Ascendance news this week. So if there is a new trailer, expect my live reaction to that to come out sometime in the next few days. If we don't, I have other videos in the works for next week and the weeks after. So yeah, have a good week. Love and solidarity to you all. This has been Laraika Laray, signing off.
Promise more than I can give. I tried to touch its cosmic sheen, but today all I smell is chlorine. Yesterday I was deep sea diving, but today I found a floor. Run my fingers over its surface, but I